Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Okay, we've looked at 3 lessons on how Jesus dealt with the disease of FOMO. Now we're going to wrap this up by looking at how we should deal with our FOMO. Okay, we looked at Jesus' leadership style. Now we're going to really look at how do we respond when we don't know certain things. This is going to be helpful for all of us. Matthew chapter 17, verse 24, after Jesus and his disciples arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma temple tax came to Peter and asked, "Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?" "Why, yes, he does," replied Peter. Number 1, I love this. Peter presumed the best about his leader. In fact, Peter had no idea whether or not Jesus paid the temple tax. But you know what? Under an accusation that was attacking the character of Jesus, Peter defended his leader's character, and he presumed the best because his leader had a great track record. You know what? There's going to be gaps between times when you're not sure, and what you can do is you can either fill that gap about your leader with fear, or you can fill it with faith. You can fill it with fear, or you can fill it with faith. So Peter comes into the house right after this, and we read, when Peter came into the house, Jesus was the first to speak. "What do you think, Simon?" he asked. "From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children or from others?" And then Jesus goes on, he goes, "Look, so we don't offend them, go out and fish, and in the fish's mouth is a coin. Go ahead and pay the temple tax, lest we offend them." I love that about Jesus. He never needlessly offended people, but he was never afraid to offend people for the right reasons. Same Jesus who said, "Let's not offend them, go fish, get a coin, pay the tax," was the same Jesus who made a whip, went into the temple, and overturned tables because he removed the things that were offending his Father. So there is a right time to be on the offense. But what Peter did here is a really great picture for all of us. He assumed the best about Jesus. Look, there are times you don't have all the facts, you don't have all the information. Why don't you give your leader the benefit of the doubt? Why don't you assume the best about them? When there's that space, when there's that gap, are you going to fill it with fear? Or are you going to fill it with faith? Are you going to, my leader, and if they really cared about me, they would, and the devil gets in there in that little gap, and he plants seeds of doubt and seeds of discouragement, seeds of division. Guard against that. We all have to battle that. All of us do. Assume the best about your leader. Mark chapter 9, verse 18. And so we're jumping back to the story when the disciples were trying to cast out the devil out of that demon-possessed child and the father situation. Whenever it sees him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. "I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." And so then what we see is in Mark 9:28, after Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not drive it out?" They didn't go, "Hey, Jesus, man, it's not fair. You, Peter, and James are up on the mountain. We're down here doing all the work. What's up with that?" They did ask the right question. They just said, "Hey, what could we do better? We didn't succeed. We weren't reaching our goal. What could we be doing better?" Number 2, you know what they did? They processed up with Jesus. Look, when you're dealing with something, there's something you can't do well, you're struggling, you process up. They didn't go to one another, "Man, can you believe Jesus? He left us down here." We don't see that where they're complaining about Jesus or they're even complaining about the crowd. They just simply went to Jesus and dealt with what they could control, and that was themselves. "Hey, why couldn't we do it? What do we need to be better? What do we need to learn? Teach us, Jesus." And when you go to other people and you process your problem, you process about your boss, you process about another staff member, you're processing about another department, another church member, what happens is you're really participating in what unfortunately has become the legal sport inside of Christianity, which is gossip. That's the one legal sport somehow in Christianity, because it's not gossip. We call it prayer requests, or we call it, "Could you help me? I need some perspective." Well, if you want perspective, go to the person, which is process up with that person. Go directly to that person, and we hear that over and over inside of Scripture. And thirdly, process privately. They went to Jesus privately. They didn't process in public in a way that might have made them look bad or in a way that made Jesus look bad or cast doubt on their team. They went privately and had those private conversations. I have never been offended when a staff member of any level of organization has just said, hey, I need help. There's something I don't understand. I can't get over something. I'm stuck. Give me some clarity. And especially when they assume the best about me, when they come and go, Pastor, I don't think this is your heart, but I'm just stuck. This situation here, I don't understand it. Help me. And I've talked to every level of our organization, even within our own church, or I've helped people just get unstuck. And what we have found is a lot of times by them coming, it was really just a misunderstanding. There were facts that they didn't know that when I gave it to them, it was like, oh, that makes sense. I get it now. And you know what? Sometimes there were facts I didn't have, things I didn't know, and it helped me get perspective. And I'm like, oh, well, you know what? Thank you for bringing that to me. I didn't understand how that came across, or you know what? That's a blind spot there. We need to fix that, or I need to fix that. And so it helped me. And so it helps the whole team when you process in private with the right people. So it's our responsibility to deal with our FOMO. Your leader can't change your heart. It's your responsibility to manage your heart. In fact, Proverbs tells us, above all else, guard your heart. It did not say above all else, be informed. Above all else, have all the facts. Above all else, know all the stuff. It just says above all else, guard your heart, for out of it flow all the issues of life.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at ericlawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.